Hello again, friends. We're going to continue with chapter 5. I hope it's not our last chapter of the day, but it might have to be, I'm afraid. The holidays. So many things to do. I just don't understand it, said Klaus, which was not something he said very often. Violet nodded in agreement and then said something she didn't say very frequently either. It's a puzzle. I'm not sure we can solve. Oh, Lord. Oh, no. All right, bear with me here. Pie tree escam ola v del rish a chmix et, Sunny said. Oh my goodness. Which was something she had said only once before. No kidding. It meant something along the lines of, I must admit, I don't have the faintest idea of what is going on. And the first time the youngest Baudelaire had said it, she had just been brought home from the hospital where she was born and was looking at her siblings as they leaned over her crib to greet her. This time she was sitting in the unfinished wing of the hospital where she worked and was looking at her siblings as they tried to guess what Hal had meant when he mentioned the Snicket fires. If I had been with the children, I would have been able to tell them a long and terrible story about men and women who joined a noble organization only to find their lives wrecked by a greedy man and a lazy newspaper. But the siblings were alone, and all they had of the story were a few pages from the Quagmire notebooks. It was night, and after working all day in the Library of Records, the Baudelaire orphans had made themselves as comfortable as they could in the unfinished section of Himlich Hospital. But I'm sorry to say the phrase as comfortable as they could here means not very comfortable at all. Violet had found a few flashlights designed to be used by builders working in dark corners, but when she arranged them to light up their surroundings, the light made clear just how filthy their surroundings really were. Just Klaus. Klaus had found some drop cloths designed to be used by painters who did not want to drip paint on the floor, but when he wrapped them around himself and his sisters, the warmth only made clear just how freezing it was when the evening wind blew through the sheets of plastic that were nailed to the wooden boards. And Sunny had used her teeth to chop up some of the fruit in Hal's bowl to make a sort of fruit salad for dinner. Oh, sorry. So delightful. But each handful of chopped fruit only made clear just how inappropriate it was to be living in such a bare and lonely place. But even though it was clear to the children how filthy, freezing, and inappropriate their new living quarters were, nothing else seemed clear at all. We wanted to use the Library of Records to learn more about Jacques Snicket, Violet said, but we might end up learning more about ourselves. What in the world do you think is written about us in the file Hal mentioned? I don't know, Klaus replied. And I don't think Hal knows either. He said he doesn't read any of the files. Strig, Sunny said, which meant, and I was afraid to ask him any more about it. Me too, Violet said. We simply can't call attention to ourselves. Any minute now, Hal could learn that we're wanted for murder, and we'd be dragged off to jail before we learned anything more. We've already escaped from jail once, Klaus said. I don't know if we could do it again. I thought that if we had a chance to look over these pages from Duncan's and Isadore's notebook, Violet said, we could find the answers to our questions. But the Quagmire's notes are very difficult to read. Klaus frowned and moved a few fragments of the Quagmire pages around as if they were pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. The harpoon gun tore these pages to shreds, he said. Look what Duncan has written here. Jacques Snicket worked for VFD, which stands for Volunteer, and then it's ripped right in the middle of the sentence. And on this page, Violet said, picking up a page I cannot bear to think about, it reads, in photographs and in each public place, Snicket rarely shows his face. Isadora oh no, sorry. Sorry. I have to ignore you, sister. Sorry. It's a rhyming couplet. It'll be done soon. This scrap says apartment, Klaus said, and has what looks like half of a map. That might have to do with the apartment where we lived with Jerome and Esme Squalor. Don't remind me, Violet said, shuddering at the thought of all the misfortune the children had encountered at 667 Dark Avenue. Rebecca, Sunny said, pointing to one of the pieces of paper. This page has two names on it, Violet said. One name is Funkut. That's the man who wrote this horrible play Olaf forced us to perform, Klaus said. I know, Violet said, but the other name I don't recognize. Anagram? Well, the Quagmires were researching Count Olaf and his sinister plot, Klaus said. Maybe Anagram is one of Olaf's associates. It's probably not the hook-handed man, Violet said, or the bald man with the long nose. Anna is not usually a man's name. It could be the name of one of the white-faced women, Klaus said. Orlando, Sunny said, which meant or the one who looks like neither a man nor a woman. Or someone who we haven't yet met, Violet said with a sigh, and turned her attention to another piece of paper. This page isn't ripped at all, but all it has on it is a long list of dates. It looks like something was going on every 12 weeks or so. Klaus picked up the smallest piece and held it up for his sister to see. Behind the glasses, his eyes looked very sad. This piece just says fire, he said quietly, and the three Baudelaires looked down sadly at the dusty floor. With any word, there are subconscious associations, which simply means that certain words make you think of certain things, even if you don't want to. The word cake, for example, might remind you of your birthday. And the words prison warden might remind you of someone you haven't seen in a very long time. The word Beatrice reminds me of a volunteer organization that was swarming with corruption. And the word midnight reminds me that I must keep writing this chapter very quickly, or else I will probably drown. But the Baudelaires had all sorts of subconscious associations with the word fire, and none of them were pleasant to think about. The word made the children think of Hal, who had mentioned something about the Snicket fires this afternoon in the library of records. Fire made the youngsters think of Duncan and Isidore Quagmire, who had lost their parents and their brother, Quigley, in a fire. And of course, the word fire made the Baudelaires think of the fire that had destroyed their home and begun the unfortunate journey that had led them to the half-finished wing of Himlich Hospital. The three children huddled quietly together under their drop cloths, getting colder and colder as they thought about all the fires and subconscious associations that were in the Baudelaire lives. That file must contain the answers to all these mysteries, Violet said finally. We need to find out who Jacques Snicket was and why he had to have the same tattoo as Count Olaf. And we need to know why he was murdered, Klaus added. And we need to learn the secret of VFD. Us, Sunny said, which meant, and we need to know why there's a picture of us in the file. We have to get our hands on that file, Violet said. That's easier said than done, Klaus pointed out. Hal told us specifically not to touch any of the files we weren't working with, and he'll be right there with us in the Library of Records. We'll just have to find a way, Violet replied. Now, let's try and get a good night's sleep so we can stay alert tomorrow and get a hold of the file on the Snicket fires. Klaus and Sunny nodded in agreement and arranged the drop cloth into a sort of bed. While Violet turned off the flashlights one by one, the three Baudelaires huddled together for the rest of the night, getting what sleep they could on a filthy floor with a cold wind blowing through their inappropriate home. And in the morning, after breakfast or leftover fruit salad, they walked to the completed half of Himlich Hospital and carefully walked down all those stairs, past the intercom speakers and the confusing maps. Hal was already in the Library of Records when they arrived, unlocked the file cabinets with his long loop of keys, and immediately Violet and Klaus got to work filing the information that had come through the chute during the night, while Sunny turned her tooths. It says that, tooths. attention to the file cabinet that needed to be opened. But the Baudelaire's minds were not on filing or on file cabinets. Their minds were on the file. Just about everything in the world is easier said than done, with the exception of systematically assisting Sisyphus's stealthy, oh my goodness, I can't even speak, susceptible sister, which is easier done than said. Oh my gosh, I should try that again, but I'm not gonna. Which is easier done than said, but but it is frustrating to be reminded of this fact. As Violet filed a piece of paper containing information on cuttlefish under M, for mollusks, of course, she said to herself, I'll just walk down the S aisle and look under Snicket. But Hal was already in the S aisle, filing away paintings of sewing machines, and she could not do what she said. As Klaus filed a survey of thimbles under P for protection of the thumb, he said to himself, I'll just walk down the F aisle and look under F for fires. But by that time, Hal had moved to the F aisle and was opening a file cabinet to rearrange biographies of famous Finnish fishermen. And Sunny twisted her teeth this way and that, trying to open one of the locked file cabinets in the B aisle, thinking that perhaps the file was inside filed under Baudelaire's. But when the lock finally broke just after lunch, the youngest siblings opened the cabinet and saw the youngest sibling opened the cabinet and saw that it was absolutely empty. Nil, Sunny said, as the three children took a short fruit break in the antechamber. Me neither, Klaus said, but how can we get a hold of the file when Hal is always around? Maybe we can just ask him to find it for us, Violet said. If this were a regular library, we would ask the librarian for help. In a library of records, maybe we should ask Hal? You can ask me anything you want, Hal said, walking into the antechamber. But first, I have to ask you something. He walked over to the children and pointed at one of the fruits. Is that a plum or a persimmon? He asked. My eyesight isn't what it used to be, I'm afraid. It's a plum, Violet said, handing it to him. Oh, good, he replied, looking it over for bruises. I was not in the mood for a persimmon. Not what. Now, what is your question? We had a question about a certain file, Klaus began carefully, not wanting Hal to become suspicious. I know it's not customary for us to read the files, but if we were very curious, would it be okay to make an exception? Hal bit into the plum and frowned. Why would you want to read one of the files? He asked. Children should read happy books with bright pictures, not official information from libraries of record. But we're interested in official information, Violet said. And we're so busy filing things away that we don't get a chance to read anything in the files. That's why we were hoping to take one home with us and read it. Hal shook his head. Paperwork is the most important thing to do in the hospital, he said sternly. That's why the files are only allowed out of the room if there's a very important reason. For example, but the Baudelaire's did not get to hear an example because Hal was interrupted by a voice coming over the intercom. Attention, the voice said, and the children turned to face a small square speaker. Attention, attention. The three siblings looked at one another in shock and horror, and then at the wall where the speaker was hanging. The voice coming over the intercom was not Babs. It was a faint voice, and it was a scratchy voice, but it was not the voice of the head of human resources at Heimlich Hospital. It was a voice that the Baudelaire's heard wherever they went, no matter where they lived or who tried to protect them. And even though the children had heard this voice so many times before, they had never gotten used to its sneering tone, as if the person talking were telling a joke with a horrible and violent punchline. Attention! The voice said again, but the orphans did not have to be told to pay attention to the terrible voice of Count Olaf. Babs had signed from Resigned. Babs has resigned from Himmlish Hospital, said the voice, and the siblings felt as if they could see the cruel smile Olaf always had on his face when he was telling lies. She decided to pursue a career as a stunt woman and has begun throwing herself off buildings immediately. My name is Mateus, and I am the new head of human resources. I will be conducting a complete inspection of every single employee here at Himmlish Hospital, beginning immediately. That is all. An inspection, Hal repeated, finishing his plum. What nonsense! They should finish the other half of the hospital instead of wasting time inspecting everything. What happens during an inspection? Violet asked. Oh, they just come and look you over, Hal said carefully, and began walking back to the Library of Records. We'd better get back to work. There's a lot more information to file. We'll be along in a moment, Klaus promised. I'm not quite done with my fruits. Well, hurry up, Hal said, and left the anteroom. The Baudelaires looked at one another in worry and dismay. He's found us again, Violet said, talking quietly so Hal could not hear them. She could barely hear her own voice over the sound of her heart pounding with fear. He must know we're here, Klaus agreed. That's why he's doing the inspection. So he can find us and snatch us away. Tell, Sonny said. Who can we tell? Klaus asked. Everyone thinks Count Olaf is dead. They won't believe 3 children if we say that he's disguised himself as Mateus, the new head of human resources. Particularly 3 children who are on the front page of the Daily Punkatilio, Violet added, wanted for murder. Our only chance is to get that file on the Snicket Fires and see if it has any evidence that will bring Olaf to justice. But files aren't allowed out of the Library of Records, Klaus said. Then we'll have to read them right here, Violet said. That's easier said than done, Klaus pointed out. We don't even know what letter to look under, and Hal will be right in the room with us all day. Night, Sonny said. You're right, Sonny, Violet said. Hal is here all day long, but he goes home at night. When it gets dark, we'll sneak back over here from the half-finished wing. It's the only way we'll be able to find the file. You're forgetting something, Klaus said. The Library of Records will be locked up tight. Hal locks all the file cabinets, remember? I hadn't thought of that, Violet admitted. I can invent one lockpick, but I'm not sure I'll have time to invent enough lockpicks to work on all these file cabinets. Shoo, Sonny said, which meant something like, and it takes me several hours to open one cabinet with my teeth. Without the keys, we'll never get the file, Klaus said. And without the file, we'll never defeat Count Olaf. What can we do? The children sighed and thought as hard as they could, staring in front of them as they did so. And as soon as they stared in front of them, they saw something that gave them an idea. The thing they saw was small and round and had colorful and shiny skin, and the youngsters could see that it was a persimmon. But the Baudelaires knew that if someone's eyesight wasn't what it used to be, it might look like a plum. The Baudelaire orphans sat and stared at the persimmon and began to think how they might fool someone into thinking one thing was really another. Oh, all right, that is the end of chapter 5. All right, I will be back with you with chapter 6 as soon as I possibly can, I promise.